Greetings. This is a magic mirror, and I look through this mirror, and on Facebook I can see who's watching sometimes, and who's watching can even answer back. That's a pretty fancy romper room, if you ask me. My name is Michael Miller. This is a Michael Miller trademark training video out to you because you're watching. Thank you. And I'm overwhelmed that over the last few days there have been somebody or some viewings of my posts, which is totally unnerving because usually I think I'm projecting to at least the year 3030 and ultimately to the year 4040. 1,000 or 2,000 years out there. In that light, and based on the presumption that the brand will last that long, I welcome my licensed affiliates and my licensed presenters, which I've taken a keener focus on over the last year or so. For the core new core, this broadcast is meant. For my patrons, at least those who are patrons, are either supporting my website at hermit.com, 24 gigabytes. And I have 4 patrons in that, and I could use 4,000 or 5,000 more. So please demonstrate some support. And this broadcast is also for anyone interested in surviving and thriving as a Pilates instructor or student. Three things on my list today, and okay, another way to support me is with stuff I rarely mention. If you go to Zazzle.com, Zazzle.com, and then search for Michael Miller Pilates, you can order t-shirts and other stuff. And if you order t-shirts, order them bigger than the size you want to believe in, just because what they deliver is smaller than what you might think. Okay? I want you to be happy with it. So at least a size or two above what you're used to. If you're going to get a core new t-shirt, a Michael Miller Pilates trademark, or Michael Miller trademark, Zazzle.com. Alright, so end of commercial. Beginning of 3 things. The reformer on the reformer. Tendon stretch on the reformer. Does not go under the pseudonym of rocking horse. Insofar as what I recommend to you in tendon stretch, where you start seated on the bar that's elevated, and your metatarsals are on the end of the carriage, and there's, you know this. If you don't know how to do this, take lessons. Don't try to do it on your own. But in that tendon stretch, it's very dynamic because the movement involves springs. And it's more than just being a rocking horse out and in. It's meant to start at and end at the ease of being in alignment between your ankles and your hips, vertical in space. So you're in a tendon stretch. Your heels are below the level of the contact point of the metatarsals on the end of the carriage. From seated, you bend over and straighten your legs with your head held in, curled in. To be able to, you got to control this, the tendon stretch, that's why the name of the exercise, Achilles tendon primarily in a big way, that you're getting from a dorsiflexion where your toes are able to be pulled back further than 90 degrees. Without locked knees, but straight legs. Your hips are the end point that your ankles connect to as an end point of rotation that knows itself and finds itself vertical in space because you can feel it. So much of this, by the time you get to that exercise, assumes you know how to make rotation at your ears and have that be part of the endpoints that are involved. So you can look at it from ears to ankles in some ways, because it's like a passive stretch, it's a tendon stretch, and you're letting that stretch through the Achilles tendon happen through the course of the effort. Now, in MMP, you start at ease and come back to ease. And you do that because in order to be eccentric in your effort, you have to start at ease. It's amazing how much difference the orientation of the wrist is, because the more it's in neutral, the straighter the wrist is, and therefore the stronger in its push, and the more length that gives you in terms of allowing your hips to come forward enough. It's an interesting, fascinating exercise to demonstrate, to do. But so in MMP it starts with vertical, ankles to hips. Smooth curve, hips, shoulders to ears. Wrists in alignment, not in tension with the springs, but up against it. Such an eloquent exercise. Your inhalation initiates at your core, right? And that whole engagement of your core then works through to the shoulders, and why the tendon stretch is so eloquent, because you're anchoring through your shoulders to a contact point at the end of extended arms. You're all real way away from center when it comes to grounding, and you're stabilizing from your hips first, and then an extension of that happens through your shoulders out to the contact point through the palms of your hand. The inhale takes you out into the range of the exercise, and then comes back to where you started, vertical. If you could actually do that 3 reps in a row, just right back to center, and inhale takes you out, exhale brings you home, and do that 3 times in a row, you can dust off your hands and say, well, I have that one connected and I have that one controlled. What's coming next? Okay. So I know that might be the rocking horse tendon stretch, where you never get in a position where you are in vertical, and you're just you're just making a rocking motion, like a rocking horse. In MMP, just so that I'm saying about that one point of view, this is a tendon stretch that starts at ease in the springs and in your body, really. You're under tension because you're in dorsiflexion, stretching your Achilles tendon at ease. It's a stretch from the get-go. Your inhale takes you out and brings you back, and, okay, I see. And so much of this, okay, my friend says, well, what else do you do? Just talk? And, okay, so this is the reformer, this is the metatarsals, this is the rotation at the ankle, right? The end point at the ankle. This is the knee. I got things out of proportion right away. The knee, the shoulders, the knee, the hips, and then you're bent over in shoulders and ears. Coordinate tension between those 3 points on a smooth curve. And the arms that come from the shoulders and reach to the bar. The point I want to make is that when the carriage goes out, the hips don't rock back. The carriage goes out and the hips stay in front of the bar. So if you really want to demonstrate tendon stretch, as MMP would profess to do it, you come from a position vertical in space between hips and ankles. Your engagement is uniform at the get-go, perhaps already because you're in the tension of the stretch. But you have to connect it all together and distribute what you do out that way without necessarily having to fall back to do it. Visually, it's fine, and it may be enticing, and it draw people into saying, well, I could do that, and that's great. But knowing where that goes, or how that starts and how that finishes, with respect to the physics that you're in and the alignment of your body, the degree to which you show alignment and the ability to maintain a position, meaning hips staying in front of the bar, that all comes from the arms. Man, it's such a great exercise. And of course, to do it all, it really takes you deeply into your grip at the hip. Reformer tendon stretch. Yeah, we talked about that. Starts at ease in the vertical. Just in the stretch of the heels down, there's no pressure, there's no pointing of the foot. You know, you're taking the tendon stretch and making a tendon stretch. And then returns to at ease, vertical. up against tension but not in it. So that all of the engagement comes from, you get all set up how you want to be, and then it's your engagement that starts from here and spreads out through the rest of your body to be a uniform engagement in which you make the effort of going out and in with the carriage. Such a great exercise. So number 2, symmetry is the target. It's so weird that I talked about asymmetrical Pilates yesterday, because there on a title of some movement was movement labeled asymmetric Pilates. And I don't really think that my broadcast had reached them. They were just clearly stating what they were doing. And my only summary over-the-shoulder remark on that would be to reiterate that the target is symmetry. So, I'm not saying asymmetrical engagement and capability isn't good to have, but in its exploration, it's meant to improve one's symmetrical capability. My opinion. I mean, we're a human being. We're symmetrical, right down the midline. Try to be. And to the extent that we are and can be, we're then more capable of participating in the range of motion that's possible. 3 dimensions. The front plane, and the plane that divides that by 90 degrees. Unless you get beyond the field of interest of MMP Pilates, it's the 3D world that we're interested in, until I guess we get to observing, which is a third of the method. But symmetry is the target, and the definition of symmetry I wanted to share with you: the quality of being made up of exactly similar parts facing each other or around an axis. Now, I'm thinking in terms of symmetry, in terms of arms and legs circling in the same direction, in the same way, so that it's symmetrical side to side. And in terms of taking a point of view with MMP, usually it's just a matter of looking at variance of degree and wondering about sequentiality. And as reflected on previously, I see asymmetric exploration towards enhanced symmetrical capability. And if that's no big deal in semantics, then... But I found it interesting that symmetrical, the symmetry of movement, like arms and legs in planes, is what I'm talking about. Specifically, maybe generally it applies, I don't know. But arms and legs in planes, being symmetrical or not, the bulk of the expression is in Joe's original work, that way. And I think the indication is that in the pursuit of the control you're after, ultimately you're after symmetrical control rather than asymmetrical control. Or maybe that's just trying to place one over the other and they're equal, I don't know. But I do know that there's much more symmetrical in Joe's work than asymmetrical. And so right there, being able to establish that as a guideline to understanding the choices you make in terms of how you do what you do and the way and the order that you do them in. And then my third thing today, thinking only plays a part. There is no switch that you can flip in a person's thinking that gives them some sensation of what of them exists outside of the world they live in within their thinking. We all live within our thinking. So as an instructor, you don't ever make thinking feel uncomfortable and like there's more to the world than what they think there is. You just want to enhance their capability of coordinating their thinking with their observing in their body, in their movement. What a pure target. What a universal goal, both in the pursuit of the individual as well as the teacher guiding the way. So thinking only plays a part. But you can't make a big deal out of that or go to anywhere else other than where I go to, which is thinking is prefrontal cortex and observing is amygdala hippocampus. Go learn how to spell those words. And then look them up in terms of where they are and what their shape is and what they do. You know, I don't know if this is why the word is the word, but the role of this part of the brain is to act like a hippopotamus, the way I envision it, where a hippopotamus just comes up above the surface of the water and looks around to see where it is. Okay? The hippocampus in the brain keeps a sense of location about where you are, where you're going. Keeps track of the locations where you got to turn and stuff. It's just like a hippopotamus coming up and looking around to see where it's at. And that is the hippocampus feeding that information into the prefrontal cortex. And the amygdala, Amygdala, I think that's right. Amygdala is the flight or fight. It's the immediate response that your body does before your thinking ever catches up to what's going on. My interpretation of it, right? When the shells are coming in over the trenches, knowing which one to duck is not about making a decision about it. It's something that just becomes good judgment. Surviving. So, how did I get off on all that? Oh, thinking only plays a part. Recognize that as an MMP instructor, you have some understanding that body, mind, and spirit is being, thinking, and observing. And we're just talking about the body and two parts of the brain. The prefrontal cortex and the amygdala hippocampus. That's just MMP's point of view. But it gives a clear identification to the complete coordination of these three things that Joe named. MMP considers them to be what goes on in your body, what goes on in your prefrontal cortex, and what goes on in your amygdala and hippocampal areas of the brain. That's the coordination that you're after in the experience. During the pursuit of the choreography. That means doing the mat. And if if you can't do the mat, or you have to do something that approaches it, but somebody's not ready, anywhere near ready for anything near the mat, right? Much of the Pilates student population. Then to the extent that whatever you can do that resonates with what exists in the original mat is taking your students toward the someday goal of performing the mat. And that's, in MMP, that's the target. It's that choreography. For lots of reasons. Because it's the poem that Joe left to us in his book. The sequence, hundreds, roll up, roll over, to push-ups, that's the poem. And that's, from that you can absorb the language, is the way I look at it. And in understanding the definition of the ideal, uniform eccentric loading flowing through progressive patterns of movement, it gives you a point of view to come from in your pursuit of doing Pilates or teaching Pilates or being a Pilates instructor. I forgot to say presenter, because presenter would come first. I think it can be a game really, but it definitely sets up the structure. When you offer a presentation for $10 in 10 minutes, or $20 for 30 minutes, or whatever. It sounds bad, but you're negotiating for you to do a presentation, and to do it up front. You get paid up front for a specific amount of time, so that everybody knows when it's over. And usually anybody that's not going to be interested will have thought they already paid too much, but they'll already know what you really want them to know. And then anybody curious in more depth to what you've already said becomes a student. So my conclusion is know your target as a student or an instructor. For me, the target is in the complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit, as a state of being in the body in the moment of the doing. And the doing is the mat, or in my case, I've succumbed to doing the intermediate reformer as a daily routine. So I could be purer and gain more benefits from probably doing just the mat. Now, why does that matter? What's the issue? What's always the issue? Gravity. So I went from know your target, the experience, to know what you know, your knowledge. Knowledge. If you have any exposure to me, you can see a point of view that is something other than, I want to set this up. How do I want to say this? Pilates. Pilates has a history and folklore and a future in theory. And maybe it's always, the spectrum has always been there, and it will always continue to be the spectrum of Pilates has an essence of its own to theory, or Pilates has no essence of its own. the fun that I've had is pointing to it and saying, see what's there? See how the word uniform comes to the definition, because Joe says in his book, contrology develops the body uniformly. That's the second thing in the MMP platform of 3. If you really believe that contrology develops the body uniformly, if you go along with what to me is just throughout all of the folklore, at least used to be folklore that exists, is that Pilates is a whole body effort. And so, if from Joe's statement that contrology develops the body uniformly, you buy into or accept that statement as the target being movement that's whole body, like the tendon stretch, is part of what it means to have it be Pilates. Oh, know your target. Knowledge. Knowledge. If you just, this is 2019. I think that Pilates popularity will do nothing but continue to explode, and people will love doing it and love becoming part of teaching it. Just what the wave is, it will continue to be, right? I want you to be able to surf that wave from your knowledge of what exists underneath the water, right? The reef, that's so important, right? So Pilates has a history in folklore and a future in theory. Life can't live forever. Go buy a t-shirt at Zazzle.com. Send your support directly is the best way. PayPal.me/michaelmillerpilates. Patreon/michaelmillerpilates. Life can't live forever. So where we started was with this, and I see you even though in YouTube I don't see who's watching. So it unnerves me all the more that somebody that has watched or anybody that's built up some views of past recordings might be looking on now live. I get audience fear. But the message is about spirit being amygdala hippocampus. And when that information connects and coordinates into the prefrontal cortex, you get a human being that's much more connected in they're much more present, and then in pursuit of the actual method, in the performance of the method, you have the knowledge that to get what you want out of Pilates, which is whole body, it does that through the engagement of core nu tension. And core nu tension is just oppositional rotation between axes. It's the way the body works. It's biomechanical. Now, that may be just a delusion of mine, but I've operated under the belief in that for a long time, and used that to get what I feel is a sensation of alignment that seems to be pretty reliable. And that's the kind of confidence that I want you to have in your knowledge and what it means. Life can't live forever. Read between the lines and see behind the curtain. Add 2 and 2. Connect the dots. Evaluate points of view. Direct your thinking. Big one. Direct your thinking. And always, Geist.